Very good morning. Yeah, because if I have to deliver a lecture on marketing accountability and matrices, I need to know how many of you have responded to me, because that's the beginning. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I must compliment the students and team of SP Giant for not only organizing this conference, but also starting it on time. Because one of the biggest issues in the marketing field that we find is very poor discipline of execution. I mean, the event starts at 9 o'clock in the morning, at 8:45, you're still arranging things. So this probably is the beginning of what you're doing. When I look at the accountability for marketing professionals, basically, I would want to begin with the culture of the organization. And every time when I'm discussing, I want to take two kinds of organization. One is a startup, maybe the SPA that was presented in the morning, and one could be organizations like the Eureka Forbes and ICICI, which are very large. When you look at a startup, you start off with just one person or one entrepreneur. If I look at myself, Shopperstop, 1991, the first employee of the company, we were 11 of us who started the company. So I was the peon, I was the darbari man, I was the accountant, and I was the marketing head. So what happens is all of us work towards satisfying the customer and ensuring that the consumer who goes back of our organization is really happy. So you're absolutely connected to the customer. So the key word that I see in startup organization is about connectivity. When you look at an organization and take, let's say, example of Oreo, which was presented today, and Professor Dulaki asked the question of saying, is this a template you're using? You're actually talking of here an organization which has already got very, very deep understanding of how the customers can be connected to the product. It comes to how do you launch it in a country like this. So the first thing is what stage are you in your organization development in order to actually give the accountability to the marketing team and have matrices to really measure those impacts. That's very, very important. The second is, as the organization grows from, let's say, a 4-pass situation, there are 3 of them, I'm sure 19 stores, they must be visiting every store, hopefully every week or every month. But when they have 1,000 stores, they'll have no clue as to what's happening in their 650th store to 1,000 stores, okay? The question there is, are they willing or have they developed the ability to make their marketing people connect to that end consumer? And this is where the biggest issue is, because my own understanding of working with family businesses is that most of the owners, managing directors think they are the creators of everything to do with customer connect, and they believe the marketing heads are the implementers to do everything with the impact that you need to create. And what it does is, at the end of the day, you find, as the organizations grow, the amount of new ideas, the amount of creativity keeps dropping, and everything that you do is just templated. You just go and repeat the same thing again and again and again and again. So the first is, how do you ensure that you have a culture where either the startup team or the marketing team or the top management team has created a very clear program of customer connect? To me, that's extremely critical. For example, how many organizations have this, saying that every marketing person has to work in a retail store every year for 3 days? Yes, when you start as a Hindustan Lever management trainee, you work for probably 3 months there. But at what point do you stop going to the store or you actually don't connect to the store? Because that's how actually you create a culture of being connected with the organization. The second important part that I see is, how well is the marketing head involved in the strategy formulation of the business? And to me, again, the question I'm saying is, because sometimes you end up having only 3 or 4 directors on the operating boards of the business. Finance is always there, and finance and governance is always there. Operations is always there. Technical and production is always there, and sometimes you have sales and marketing put together. I'm not saying there's anything wrong in it, but I'm just trying to develop a case as to what can make things better. The moment you are involved with the strategic business plans, then it's very difficult for you to escape from being accountable for what you do as a role in the marketing department. And let me take two examples. If a marketing person is involved in a retail business development or retail strategy, and which always begins with saying, you're opening so many stores, this is the kind of customer entry you want, and this is the kind of conversion you want, and this is the kind of cash memos that you need to get per conversion, and this is the number of units that you need to have per cash memo, what else do you need to give to the marketing person? I mean, the person can actually create her own plan and create her own performance measurements for herself, and the matrices are so visible. And the beauty of this is that you don't have to measure it. She or he will measure it herself. And it's become so important then for the business to measure this on a month-on-month basis and say, are we really measuring it? For example, in the businesses that I have been involved in, much very closely with retail, customer entry, conversion, transaction size, units per transaction, one set of measures. Loyalty program, contribution, recency, frequency, monetary, second set of measures. Gross margin return on floor space, which we call as GMROF, GMROL, which is gross margin return on labor, gross margin return on inventory. That's it. And these are measures which are actually put on the site of a business in all the investor meetings, and these are the measures which are put on the performance scorecards of every employee across, up to the store level. How can you say that I did a fantastic campaign, I have no control over the GMROF, the gross margin return on floor space? Yeah, but you had control on the customer entry. You had control on the conversion, because whatever activity you did, you brought the customers into the store. Whatever programs you ran inside the store left the conversion figures going up or going down. So it's very easy to connect as long as you're really focused on what you want, and as long as you're able to connect the business to the customer, I don't think it's very difficult for a marketing person not to be measured, or you can't create a matrices for measuring the marketing person. Let me take this broad strategic level and come down to a typical store level, because that's what I'm very, very familiar with. Again, very simple. We are opening a store. In 90 days' time, I want the awareness in 5-kilometer catchment to be 90%. Easy to measure. You do what you want. You have a budget. Between the 90th and 120th day, because the cycle of shopping is 4 times a year in a department store kind of a business, between the 90th and 120th day, we want the penetration to be 40%, which means that 40% of the customers in the catchment have actually visited the Shoppers Stop department store. The extraction of the business should be 20%. So 20 into 40 into 90, that's the kind of market share that you would want. It's easily measurable. I'm not saying that you will achieve the 8% or 10% market share that you want, but you can measure it. And the measures are not done by anybody else. The measures are created within the organization. I didn't mention 3 other matrices that we use in our retail business. Again, put it to our investors and our analysts, is the customer satisfaction, the employee satisfaction, and the vendor satisfaction. All the 3 we have indices in the business. And all the 3 are interlinked. And these are measured by the marketing people. So the marketing head is responsible to measure the customer satisfaction. The marketing head is involved in the measurement of the employee satisfaction, and she or he is involved in the measurement of the vendor satisfaction. How can you really escape? If the vendor satisfaction, for example, for 3 years we had a score which said vendors are not satisfied because they are not able to implement any of their promotions because of the bureaucracy that we have in the organization at the marketing level. Can you ever think of creating an objective the other way? Saying, marketing head, you're not supposed to have a bureaucratic organization and you should encourage suppliers to come. No. But this measure became automatically a measure for her or him to say, I need to work very closely with my vendors because he is an important part of our business. So the culture first, second is being part of the strategy, and third is whether the marketing objectives and the measures are part of your business measures. Because if they are not part of your business measures, then a lot of things can be questioned. Okay, you can say, I did a fantastic job, look at the TAM score or this score or the AC Nielsen score, but they're not connected to your business. Okay, or for example, why is it the market shares are used only for management information system? My share went from 1.4 to 1.5%. Why is market share not used for setting up business objectives? Business objectives are mostly on sales and profitability. Market shares are the outcome of what you have achieved. So the third level is, are you connected with the business plans, and is the marketing person aligned to the business objectives? We also use some measures, and I've also seen it in some non-retail companies, where we actually use the balanced scorecard for marketing. And the reason why we use balanced scorecard for marketing is we were finding it very difficult to align the marketing team to financial objectives. Number 1. Number 2, retail being a business where the money is available are very, very small, the whole direct marketing focus or the loyalty program focus or customer connect focus or getting repeat customers became very important. So the moment we put a financial objective, and the financial objective is not spend, the financial objective was net spend. And those of you who have dealt with retail, you find that retail in India and of course elsewhere has developed a lot of avenues of generating income by space on hire, by creating events. Now suddenly the whole thing changed. So otherwise you would have the marketing manager coming and saying, okay, for this business plan, this is the budget, and I'm going to use it and deliver the results. Now it is not that. You have 1 crore to spend, you have 80 lakhs to earn, so you will get only 20 lakhs at the end of the year to spend. So you are also working towards earning money and creating revenues to spend for marketing and customer connect. Now this was a learning that we realized the moment we brought in a financial parameter to the marketing head's measurement, and which we've thought was very, very good for us because we started seeing the marketing heads actually participating. And if you look at retail, retail also has right from visual merchandising to mass media. So there's a huge amount. It's almost a 360-degree because you have direct marketing, you have the visual merchandising. So we actually started seeing huge efficiencies and efficacy in terms of the spends of the business that was happening because there was financial objectives brought in. I did mention about the strategic part of it, which is the marketing manager being part of the whole strategy creation of the organization. The third area which we realized, and the rest of the things are fairly common, but 2 areas which we felt really made a difference was when we actually brought an internal process objective as part of the balanced scorecard and financial as part of the objective for the marketing department, which made tremendous difference. Because, I'm not blaming anybody, but most of the marketing people are so creative that many a times, okay, they hate processes. Yeah, because it's very, very difficult. How can a finance guy ask us to give 3 quotations for a creative plan? How can you compare an A creator and a B creator and a C creator on a quotation basis? It's not possible. Yeah, it's not possible. But that guy has been given a measure to say unless you have 3 quotations, you can't clear the bill. So how do you actually work on that? So to me, getting an internal process and getting a financial objective as part of the whole balanced scorecard that we created for the marketing did wonders for us as an organization, wonders for us. And you'll be surprised that an organization in retail, and I've seen many of them across, they've been able to maintain their spend for the last 5 years or 6 years almost at the same level, and all the incremental spends are coming through various resource mobilization programs, whether it is earning, whether direct marketing, whether it is monetizing the value of your customer insight, which I think is amazing, amazing, because you are sitting on huge amount of data, you're sitting on huge amount of insight, and you want to guard it. Okay, it has no value, it has no value. So the moment we put a financial objective, we start seeing value from the way there was monetization of the customer insight within the business. I don't compete with a Kirana person. So how does it stop if a P&G wants to take our data in Shoppers Stop and use it for developing an insight on the profile of their own target customers? Nothing. And they're willing to pay ₹1 million for that. Wonderful. Welcome more P&Gs and HULs to come and spend the money. So to me, it is not very complicated if you can simply put the business measures, the value culture of the organization, the whole balanced scorecard, I'm not saying adopt it, but some parts of that into the whole marketing manager's plan of creating matrices. But please don't create independent matrices where you can't actually connect with the business objectives, because that's where the whole complication comes from. And we have had these issues. Before we had this, he would say, I did a campaign, I won 3 awards. But that guy is saying, I had barely no customer in my store. So now the question is, what do you recognize? You celebrate awards, but I need customers in my store. We created a campaign which won us 3 awards. But none of the board members, none of us liked it, because they said there's no connectivity of the brand to the customer. But when we started doing a brand study, and we as a business have done a brand iconic study for the last 12 years, so we have as to where does the brand stand in the business for the last 20 years, year on year on year on year. And those of you who have tracked our brand have also seen as to how we changed our whole logo after being in existence for 15 years from the oval logo to a straight logo. And this is all done through proper studies. So we do things, we measure it. We respond to the measures, again we go back and do. So we keep measuring our success and failures. So creating objectives, I do not see it as very complicated as you're aligned. Measuring them is very, very important. And the measures to be part of the incentive bonus of the marketing heads are very, very critical. And connecting the marketing managers or the marketing heads of the business to the customers through a formal program, to me, again, is very, very critical. How do we do that? Or how do I suggest we should do it? For example, I meet a lot of FMCG players. You're selling oats, you're selling cornflakes. How many times have you gone to the kitchen of a lady and spent time with her? You're selling refrigerators. How many times have you gone and spent time with the lady in her kitchen, in her domain? We also didn't know how to manage this. For some reason, we thought, let's go and talk to the customers and do a wardrobe study. There was a huge hue and cry in the organization. Which lady will allow you to open her wardrobe and look at what kind of garments do you have? But you'll be surprised, many of our customers who are part of a loyalty program allowed us to do that. So wardrobe study became a part of the way the whole marketing program is designed. So your marketing heads will do wardrobe study once in a year, once in 2 years, for all the target segments that we have in the organization, because that's where your connect comes. Now, this is apart from the customer study that we do. Now, why do we do this? Because this gives you a qualitative feel. And I've mentioned this many times. We had shockers in our studies when we went and did the wardrobe study. Shockers. I mean, wardrobe was worse than this, the godowns of the government where things are rotting. Because you have so many clothes, you don't discard clothes. I mean, in most of the Indian houses we found, I mean, you just open and you'll have things falling on you because there's so much of clothes you have. So our issue was not how to sell. Our issue was how to create space in the wardrobe, because that became a big challenge for us. So what has retail done? The retail has only been adding up values, so the number of hangers remaining 48 or 24. Instead of selling a 1,000 rupee shirt, we sell a 2,000 rupee shirt. No, but we need to sell a 2,000 rupee shirt 6 times a year, which means the hanger has to rotate 6 times. Now, these things don't come in. Because when we looked at the customers' wardrobes, almost all the customers that we met, 90% of them have not changed their wardrobe size in the last 20 years. How many of you have changed the wardrobe in the last 1 year? Not one. How many of you have changed your wardrobe in the last 5 years? 10. How many of you have changed your wardrobe in the last 10 years? 5. So out of 200 people, there are 15 people whose wardrobes have changed. Now, if I am a marketeer, and if I'm not given a very clear task to say, hey guys, go and churn the wardrobe, you do whatever you want with the store. You can create Jim Ross measures, but it's not going to work. So some of these softer measures made a tremendous difference to the way we actually see the customers behave. Another one, which is very anecdotal but very nice, is that the CEO's wardrobe we opened, and the woman was showing the wardrobe of the CEO, and she showed us some boxer shorts, and we said, ma'am, but these boxer shorts are 49 rupees boxer shorts. And that Kanali suit is a 40,000 rupee suit. She said, why does he require a Kanali boxer short in a bloody house? He can wear a 49 rupees. She had bought it. Now we are targeting a huge, a great looking boxer short for the man, not realizing she is buying a 49 rupees boxer short. Or, for example, we are still intrigued. We are still thinking of what to do. We have found that in the Shoppers Stop First Citizens, I'm just telling you as to how, when you create measures, what triggers it gives you in terms of your business plan or marketing plan. We realized that most women who come and buy cosmetics, the maximum number of adjacent product was men's undergarment. We're still intrigued, but that's the reality. Now, how that happens? So should we have the men's undergarment next to the cosmetics department? I mean, that we will leave it to the judgment of the marketing head. Okay, coming back to the topic. The last part of how you look at the matrices is how do you measure it? But to me, how do you measure it is important. But how do you reward the person is also very, very critical, because that becomes the most difficult job in the absence of any accountability for the marketing person or the marketing department, without having the measure that I mentioned. I mean, I mentioned almost about 15, 16, 17 measures. Depending on your business, you could have lesser measures, but don't miss from rewarding the person on the measures that you've created, the measures that she or he has been accountable for, and the measures that she or he has achieved. Please definitely keep a certain portion of reward for he or she to be connected to the customer or consumer, depending on what kind of a business that you're running into. Me, that is very, very critical. And at the end of the day, this is a function which is now become very difficult because now you require financial understanding of businesses to be a great marketing manager. Now, this is a new thing that has come up because earlier, I mean, most marketing managers would not, I mean, that's part of the accountant, and they always have a fight with the accountant. But now we're finding it's becoming tougher and tougher and tougher because the media has become very expensive, the customers become very demanding, the social media has come into play. So to be able to put your dollar into the right place and get the best of measures out of the dollar, I think is becoming very, very challenging for most of the marketing heads. So just to conclude, 4 or 5 things. Culture, very, very critical. Being part of the strategic team, very critical. Broad-based measures to be put in, including financial measures and process, because these are 2 things which generally as an organization we don't find, because that's not the way they're groomed. Finally, ensure that there are measures, and the last is reward them. And when they achieve, reward them very handsomely. So for all the marketing managers in the place, well done. Thank you. I have another 7, 8 minutes to take on questions if anybody has. I would love to answer that, please. Yes, sir. Yep. Go ahead.
Come across a term called operating leverage, wherein the contribution margin is increased by increasing the fixed costs at the expense of variable costs. So then the direct effect is that as the sales volume increases, the profits also increase more because the variable costs have been compensated at the cost of fixed costs. But how is this practically done, more so in a retail industry?
It's not very difficult. I mean, let me take an example of a direct marketing. I mean, the businesses that I'm involved with, in one business, 70% of the business comes from loyalty program in one business, and 55% of the business comes from the loyalty program or the members in the other business. Okay, and we track them almost on a regular basis. You could actually have, now you already put the money on the hardware and the software, and the program is running, and you're adding up, let's say, one has 3 million members, another has 600,000 members. You're adding up about 500,000 members every year. Okay, and that adding up member is a variable cost for you depending on the number of members that you add. Now, most of the times we use this only for our business, which means how do we market ShopperStop or Hypercity or Crossword or Mac or Estee Lauder to our customers, okay? But there are lots and lots of products which have an adjacent product basket within the buy basket of the customer, okay? So if you can align, and the best example is what happened today. Today, if you look at it, actually SPGN should charge a commission to Eureka and ICICI if they do a back-end deal sitting here. That's operating leverage out of the fixed cost of this conference. Yes, please.
So I've come from Maruti Suzuki. Actually, in my company, what I've seen, the responsibility of the footfalls as a dealership is the responsibility of a salesperson. But I have another example, Mercedes-Benz, where the responsibility of the footfalls at the dealership is the responsibility of the marketing team. So just wanted to know what is right, whether footfalls at the dealership should be a responsibility of a marketing manager or marketing team or a sales team.
Depending on the kind of product that you're dealing. I mean, you didn't tell me in the first case what is the product. The second one is Mercedes.
Maruti. I am from Maruti, and the another case I'm giving is Mercedes.
Okay, so is it Maruti 800 Alto or Maruti the higher end?
It's for all the models.
Fair enough. I mean, typically what we realize is the higher you go, okay, it is very easy for the servicing person, in which case you call here the salesperson, the customer care associate, to generate a list of his prospective customers and therefore ensure and encourage the customers to come into the store. A lot of people in the jewelry business do this. I mean, they have a very clear track record of the customers who have come and bought from them, and they're able to talk to them. I mean, Tanishq, through their Anutara Club, does this very well. The person who runs that high-end showroom in APNC Road, she has a huge list of base. She would call up personally and say, will you come in? I'm there between 10 and 11. I would like to showcase to you the new Nizam collection which has come in. So that's possible as you go high end. As you come onto the lower end, okay, your size of store keeps coming down, and the kind of employees or the kind of organization that you have to deliver the results sharply declines. So let's say if it is a two-wheeler showroom or a Honda showroom or a multi-brand showroom in a small place, let's say on the Malad Link Road, I mean, you have only 2 sales associates. Okay, they have to sell on the floor, so they can only do pre-sales service, but they can't go and get footfalls into the business. So I would say that depending on the size and scale of the product, it may actually change from one end to the other end. It also depends on the kind of marketing that the product has done. Because now you find that with modern trade coming in, a lot of brands are actually driving traffic into the modern trade, because the modern trade is able to receive it or drive traffic into the mall. You see lots of car promotions happening in the mall now, where you can actually see that the traffic is there and you're exposing. So you're also getting awareness, you're also getting conversions, and you're also creating a database. And that database is then given to the nearby local retailer for him to go and pursue it. So in the third case, it's a mix of both that's happening.
Excuse me.
So this is Dhruv from PGPM course. I would like to understand, with the opening of the retail industry, with the FDI coming in, what sort of changes would we experience? What sort of competition would be coming in? And what will be the strategies moving forward?
We have to have one more conference. Well, I think the FDI is going to be the best for the consumers for the next 10 years. I don't think retailers need to worry about it because we're so underpenetrated. The growth of the consumption is almost 5 to 6 times higher than the growth of penetration of the modern retail. So the so-called modern retailers are not even able to capture even 15% of the growing pie. Forget about taking a new share. So I don't think we have to worry about it. This is all a hover which I think the media has created, FDI coming. I don't think anything will happen. What kind of competition will come? I don't expect anybody to come tomorrow. And even if they come tomorrow, they will take exactly the same time or slightly more time than probably what many of the Indians have done, because they also have to take 51 licenses like we take. Okay, they can't get away from. They also have a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act to follow, which none of us in this country follow. So I think there are these challenges so I don't think we need to really worry about that part of, as far as the growth is concerned, in terms of the business, I think that should give us the confidence that the way our social infrastructure of residences are done, it's very difficult for modern retail to penetrate. I mean, I stay in Warsaw. The biggest store is a DMart. If I have to find another 15,000 square feet store, it's impossible. So people have to work with the kiranas. And I believe that in the next 10 years, you'll find the kiranas growing and becoming so strong and so powerful, with the connectivity and the mobiles and things happening. And we as consumers will get serviced. So we'll get the benefit of the kirana's personalized service and home delivery, and get the benefit of the technology of the Walmarts and the hypermarkets.
Sir, I've been a great admirer of the measurement culture. I just want you to share your experiences when you were a startup of how did you manage to do the front-ended investment in technology that you did in, to bring in the measurement culture, or even if you're talking about the brand audits and the studies that you did. And how do you kind of measure the ROI of that, and you convince the boards to front-end that investment, which you're going to amortize over a period of time?
I was very, very lucky guy, so very few people. But let me tell you 2 or 3 things that we did. And unknowingly we did all this, but in a very, very rudimentary fashion. Because none of us were from the business of retail or garments and apparel, we had no clue of how the business should be run. So all of us is to stand outside, the managers of that, outside the shop, take customers' addresses and name on a slip of paper, and ask questions and say, what did you like, what did you not like, what did you buy, and what did you not buy? Is there something that we can get? So it's almost like an online kind of feedback that we used to get. And this is how we learned the business and did the business. When we were changing office, my secretary came and said, there is a carton which has got a lot of small white slips after 4 years. So I said, please take out what it is. And she said, there are 50,000 slips like that. When I actually looked at it, these were those slips we were taking name and address. So the first Citizens Club started because of those 50,000 slips which my secretary had saved. Okay, so that was one ignorant. The second thing was not out of ignorance, but out of challenge. I had gone to Singapore in a technology exhibition when we had 2 stores. I went to the #1 technology company in the world in retail. And they asked me saying, where are you coming from, India? How many stores do you have? 2. What is your turnover? $12 million. He said, we don't service India. Okay, we don't service anybody who has less than 100 stores. And we don't service anybody less than $100 million. I went to the next store. I call this the peanut story. I have written about it. Okay, I went to the next store. There was a small bowl of peanut. This guy saw me, made me sit down, gave me peanuts to eat. And then I said, I have 2 stores. I want to invest in the best technology in the world. And he said, but we don't service India. I said, I will give you an airfare to come to India. Will you please come? He said, yes. So I gave him airfare. He came. And that's when we bought JDA. And we were ignorant. Don't tell. My board was also ignorant. So I said, let's invest $1 million. They said, go ahead and invest. Okay, but no, we did take the help of Technopak, Germany, and UK to help us create the structure. We were laughed at that point of time, and today we are considered as one of the most strategic decisions that we took that time. But I think it's all about your gut. It's all about your gut. As a professional, I got to become an entrepreneur, okay, but it's all about, your gut and belief. It failed. Those of you who have read the stories, it actually failed. The implementation failed. And, we were written off in this country. But the very grit that, no, we are going to make it happen. And everybody of us got to make it happen. And it happened. So I think it's more about that.
We have time for one last question from there.
Yes, please. No, only one question for you, one question for the lady also there. Yeah. Okay, I'll come to that. Ma'am, will you ask the question so I can answer both together? Yeah, let me answer the first question. You said, why did we change the logo? I told you that for the last 12 years, we have been maintaining this whole brand iconographic study that we do year on year to say where does a brand stand in the minds of the consumers. And we also have First Citizen data from 1994 onwards and 2.9 million who contribute 70% of our business. What we realized is that we are aging. Our average age when we started was 26-year customers. And from 1991 to 2001, our average age had shifted to 31. So we said if we're going to shift 5 years every 15 years or 12 years, okay, in the next 20 years, 50 years, we will not be relevant to this market at all. So that was the number one thing we realized. Second is when we actually did the brand study, we found that a lot of youngsters came to our store, bought from our store, but did not want to carry a Shopper Stop carry bag, the green and red bag, because their parents were carrying, and this was a darling of the 35 to 45, the middle-aged so-called people like us. So they were shopping from us, but they were not wanting to relate to us. So therefore, we had to go back and do a lot of research, and we actually checked up saying, what can we do? And actually, what we realized was totally different from what I believed. I'm using the word I. I thought our old logo is something that people love. I thought the way Shopper Stop is there, something that they love. And I was totally against the oval getting changed. You know what our research said? They only relate us with the black and white color. It was so easy for us to change. When we changed the oval into a straight font, there was absolutely no, because they have always related to the way we have expressed ourselves in the black and white color. Okay, so it was out of the research, out of the understanding, and then we have looked at it, and we have been able to maintain the age. Okay, we have been able to maintain the age means we have not become younger, but we are able to maintain. But because of cost pressures and business pressures, we had to also increase our average price, which means we started upgrading our products. So therefore, we've been able to maintain the age. So that was your answer. When we go to the wardrobe study, you are absolutely right. We love the women who say, I have everything flowing out of my wardrobe, but I still don't have anything. Because that's what we want. We want many of them. But, ma'am, we love them. We love them. But you know what was very interesting was, that first wardrobe study is what gave us the first Salwar Kurta Dupatta exchange festival that we started. You won't believe that we had so many women who came and would dump their wardrobe into our store, not buy or replace. Because they said, we didn't know where to give. So they just came and gave away. So we gave a lot of these garments to charity. So it is not that they don't want to buy, it is just that they don't know how to clear the wardrobe. So that was one. The second, we found a man, you know what he said? In fact, we had a gentleman who came to me and called me up and said, Nagesh, I need to exchange a shirt. So I said, exchange a shirt, when did you buy? He said, it's almost 9 months. After 9 months, we're exchanging a shirt. He said, I have a problem. I came to your store. It's a big store. I loved a particular kind of shirt. By the time I went home, I had bought 3 of them. The same shirt, same size, everything's the same. That's the way men shop, you know, you appreciate. And only after 9 months he realized that he had 3 shirts of the same kind. Okay, yeah, so that's what happens. And yeah, so the exchange mela came out of this understanding. And look at what Big Bazaar did, compliments to them. We only started exchanging the garments. They learned from that and started doing Bangar exchange. I mean, literally they would exchange anything in this country. So you look at the mentality of the customer. So how do you get an insight? How do you look at it? How do you react to it? It's not always good. We have photographs of 2 women holding one side of the salwar and this side, the other side of the salwar, saying this is something I want. So, but anyhow, that's retail. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.